Welcome to IQ HitList. I am Vishwas Sadashivan. IQ HitList is inconvenient questions, one-on-one interview that explores the views of an individual that you want to see. My guest today is, well, an inconvenient man. Some say he's an angry man, irreverent to the core. Actually, I don't think so. He's actually quite nice, perhaps to me. For the government, he's probably a serious irritation, especially when it comes to certain topics like poverty. So, who is this man really? What makes him do the things that he has been doing for decades now, instead of just sticking to teaching at the university? What drives him? That's what we hope to find out in the next 15 to 20 minutes. I'm talking, of course, of Professor Chua Beng Huat, one of the foremost authorities in sociology in Singapore. He teaches at the NUS and is cluster leader of the Cultural Studies in Asia program at the Asian Research Institute. So, let's get this going. Beng Huat, welcome to HitList.
Thank you.
So, why are you such a pain? You know, and are you just an angry man and someone who's really perpetually irritated by things that happen around us, or are you really a rebel with a cause?
I don't think I'm particularly a rebel. I think that one's life as an academic is to actually constantly be looking at what is going on, especially if you're a sociologist, and looking at what is going on with some depth, and not just take the most surface satisfaction. So I mean, in a way, an intellectual life is an unhappy life that way. I mean, otherwise there will be no reason to be an intellectual, right? I mean, if I want to be otherwise, I might as well be a lawyer or a banker or even a civil servant.
Well, you had a very short stint at the HDB.
Yes, even then I was actually tasked to investigate what is going on on the ground in the HDB, and then see what else needs to be done.
This was in the 80s, right?
That's right.
Early 80s.
Yes.
And then what happened?
And then I had to leave. But that's history. So
no. But the question here is, you are definitely someone who is able to bring fresh perspectives, because you have been a scholar, an intellectual in this field for a long time. Do you feel that in Singapore society, we don't listen enough to contrary views from people, especially in the academia, especially intellectuals who have spent their entire life, adult life, studying certain things? Do you think we're not tapping this resource?
Well, I think part of the reason is because the definition of a good life in Singapore is very narrow. It's always about, improving material life from one generation to another. It doesn't, and we live a very high pressure life, but the statement is always it's a pressure that we can't afford to let up. So we don't sit and think about, what is life worth living, rather than just keep talking about more and more material, wealth. I mean, we have reached a point of standard of living. I don't know how else we could go higher.
Well, standard of living is often confused with quality of life.
Yes.
What's the difference?
A lot of difference.
So, tell me.
So, I think until, you just take, for example, parents complain about pressure on their children in education, right? That's actually a very serious complaint, but but the complaints come and go. The practice continues, right? You basically said, okay, in order to succeed, you got to kill yourself at school. And some kids can, some kids can't. And then, then those who cannot, what are you going to do? You have to spend a lot of time, basically, they end up being treated as failures. I think things have improved to the point where we now have multiple streams and
skills future,
and a lot of money is put into skills training in ITE, in Polytechnic, and we now even have arts, school of the arts, and the sports school. So I think things have changed quite a lot, but you still have a hard time convincing parents that things have changed. Every parent still think that every kid they have must go to university.
So let's get to the crux of the matter, if I may. One of the key areas of research for you, and something that's kept you awake at night, from what I've understood, is the whole issue of poverty.
Yes.
Right. And people, if you talk about poverty in Singapore,
Yes.
you know, as Kishore Mahbubani said, you know, I mean, there's no poverty in Singapore, you know, and if you look at the optics of it, if you walk the streets and you have a conventional view of poverty, if you walk the streets of Mumbai, you see the beggars, you see the roadside dwellers. You don't have any of that in Singapore. So why are you so preoccupied with poverty? Is there really poverty in Singapore? Come on, Beng Huat.
Definitely there's poverty in Singapore. I mean, I think what we have done is really quite interesting in that because the government's, huge chunk of the government's political legitimacy is its ability to provide housing.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, a lot of the poor are basically housed in the lowest quality public housing flats.
So what you're saying is there's no visual representation
No,
of poverty.
I think our poor is relatively invisible. They are not entirely invisible. Okay?
What's your idea of poor? What does it mean? Poor.
I'm not talking about even relative poverty. I'm actually talking about families, broken families, maybe sometimes not broken families, but families with chronic sick parents, families in which if there is a crisis or if there is any kind of accident, effectively, things shut down. For example, children immediately don't go to school that day or for the next 3 days because there's no money to send the kid to school.
This happens in Singapore today.
Of course it happens.
A lot?
While that's another problem. We never know quantitatively how much because we don't have data.
Why?
Because
why don't we have data?
Because if we have the data, for example, we really don't know how many people rent in HDB flats, in one-room flats.
Yeah.
We don't know how many of those who supposedly rent in HDB flats are in arrear and for how long. Is there data? Of course there is data. Do we get it? No, of course not.
So what do we do about it?
What do we do about it?
You are an intellectual. you are in the university. Shouldn't you all push the envelope on this matter?
Yeah. Look, if there's one grouse in the university, it's the absence of data. We all know the data that, can be done. This government keeps good records. Otherwise, it couldn't run so efficiently.
So can't you get that data from the Department of Statistics?
No.
DOS?
No.
You can't?
No.
Even an intellectual, even an academic,
if you're doing
a research.
you can.
So what should be done about this?
Well, what should be done about it is to make noise, I guess. That's why you see I make noise. I think what's done to it is to make noise.
But has the noise
is
created
to
any ripples?
continuously persist in saying things that are inconvenient. Yeah. All right. So as I say, if you ask any social worker and family centers, they would have cases which they would tell you, right, about children who can't go to school because of there was no money that day for bus fare or for pocket for food, and sometimes they go to school but they stay hungry all day, right? So every social worker in a family center know of such cases.
So when this is brought up through the Family Service Center, right, FSC, and then it goes up, what kind of intervention does exist today? The pocket money fund?
It's very hard to say. Well, the pocket money fund is an interesting one. I think it's a noble idea, noble intention, to give
the Straits Times pocket money fund,
daily expenses, and they raise a lot of money. Everybody wants to do good charity work.
Yeah.
They raise a lot of money, so children are supposed to be given $2 a day from deserving families, right? Already, that's a certain definition of that. But the money is not given to the child. The money is given to the family. Now, if you imagine a family under those kind of conditions, which already requires $2 for the children, there are a lot more pressing needs that the family need that will go to the expenditure first. it doesn't always go to the child.
Like food.
Like food.
Yeah.
Like food, right? Like utilities have to be paid, rent has to be paid. I mean, as I say, I mean, we don't know. One of the interesting thing is that, and this is fairly interesting, and we actually don't ever hear about it. The reason why we have no homelessness is because if you are really abject poor and you're not paying rent, you don't get evicted. Because the publicity cost for evicting a poor family for Singapore's image in the world is huge.
No, but that's not a bad
Our
thing.
projection of ourselves to the world is we are this huge, rich, successful, middle-class country.
No, but Beng Huat, it's not a bad thing, isn't it?
What is not a bad
No,
thing?
no, the fact that they are not evicted.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's not a bad thing.
No,
At
it's
least they're
not.
home.
No, it's not.
They're given a home, and now, but what you're saying is that's where it stops.
Well,
Beyond that,
there are I mean, I think to be fair, there are a lot of welfare schemes. But welfare schemes are built on policies. There are generic categories of people to cover, right? I think part of the problem is that a lot of these poor, the abject poor, really have to be dealt with at a more personalized case level. If you're just taking, cut-offs, for example, the wage top-up scheme.
Yep.
If you make less than $2,500, you get top-up to $2,500, or progress schemes, $1,000 minimum. So those kind of things, they cover a broad spectrum of people. But beneath that, right, there are those who are out of the net, so to
because
speak.
of very specific
Because of
and
very
peculiar
specific situations
Right.
for example, let's say you have a single mother in middle 40s, 3 young children, and who herself is chronically sick,
Yep.
and therefore, both because of sickness and childcare, unable to access any kind of full-time employment. Right?
Yep.
I mean, it's easy to imagine how that family will be poor. It's imagine how that poverty will be reproduced in the children because the children's education opportunities continuously truncated.
But isn't that what the family service centers or FSCs are supposed to do? Deal with each as a case.
I think that they do what they can. I mean, obviously, I mean, I have students who are working in, family centers and so on. They do what they can, and but some kind of more coherent sort of definitions and programs, right, could be devised. I mean, currently, I know such cases because I have students who are doing their thesis on, I mean, once I had a particular student who wanted to study so-called working poor, and I say, no, why is that? Because I think working poor is relatively okay in a sense because of all these wage top-up, social transfers, and so on. It's those who, for reason not of their choosing, cannot work.
Yeah.
And have no access to live income.
And for one thing, they don't have a CPF account.
No.
Right?
No.
So most of these transfers, budget transfers, are through the
CPF
account.
top-ups.
So there are some of these factors. But let me take you to a comment made by Chan Chun Sing when he was minister for MSF,
Right.
family and social MSF. He said this in response to a written question by the then NCMP Eugene Jong. And he said, even amongst developed countries like New Zealand and Canada, they don't subscribe to official poverty lines. He talked about poverty lines. A poverty line does not fully reflect the severity and complexity of the issues faced by poor families, which could include ill health, lack of housing, or weak family relationships. Right. Now, this seems to be in sync with what you are saying.
It's correct,
Yeah, what you are saying. In other words, you have to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
Poverty line focuses on just the income or wage you talk about, right?
Yeah.
But you should look at the total income
Right.
that
Or
is
none.
afforded.
Or no income.
Or lack of it.
Right.
So would you say that the government is on the right path?
I think that personally, I think defining poverty line or minimum income doesn't really work. I mean, in a way, because I think I would prefer to frame it the other way. It is to say, define what is a minimum necessary income per family household. Okay.
Okay.
So I mean, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing to say there's a poverty line below which you're in trouble. All right. It's one thing to say, what does a family of 4 with 2 children within a certain school-going age, right, would require to live a reasonable life in Singapore?
Yep. Without compromising education, transport,
without risk of their children reproducing poverty because of problem of education, without sort of situations in which families are living on the margin, and when the father or the mother, the main income earner, falls sick for a prolonged period of time, the family is in financial crisis. All those kind of policy. I think if we say, I mean, actually the government is sort of has a poverty line, which they don't want to call it such. Because they basically define $2,500 a month.
That's right.
As minimum necessity. Right?
Yeah.
So
household.
Yeah. So define. So even if you take it that way, right, then you can say, okay, any family below that, right, should have assistance up to that level.
But that's a basic. But what you're talking about is when you look at the granularity of it, there may be certain households with someone with a terminal ailment.
Yeah.
Now that changes the complexion altogether. So you could be even a $5,000 household, but the moment you have that kind of a debilitating condition, or the husband could be in prison.
Yeah, right? That's quite a lot of those.
So there are a lot of those things. So we've got another 4 minutes left. So I just want to take this discussion to a question, which is, what do you think is the missing factor? The government actually is on the right path.
Yes.
We don't have enough. We definitely have a dearth of people, professionals working on the ground in this area. Government is trying to tackle that, but it'll take some time, right? But what happens in the meantime? Is it because we don't have enough NGOs dealing with this in a serious way?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really bothers me is that we have NGOs for a lot of things, but we do not have explicitly an NGO that on poverty. I mean, it's not like Thailand used to have something called the Assembly of the Poor, for example, and we don't actually. There are no NGOs, as I know, that makes poverty its focus. We do have a lot of NGOs that do a lot of things on autistic children, dyslexics, animals, animal rights, Nature Society, heritage. All those are doing great work, but no one focus on poverty. And I think largely because
we even have
a lot of young people and or even middle-aged people really either think, particularly for young, they don't come into contact with the poor, so they think there are no poor people. And those who have made it sometimes think the poor are just lazy. If I can do it, why can't they do it?
Yeah.
Right? So there's this kind of successful people, making themselves sort of the heroes or the model of citizenship and sort of neglect, refuse to accept that some things are not by one's choosing to be poor.
So what do you think an NGO that focuses on a matter, or NGOs focusing on this particular issue, can contribute to the equation?
I think the first thing we need to do is get data.
Yeah.
That we currently don't have.
But an NGO may not be able to get it.
But if you can't do it on a mass scale, you could do it either, say, take representative neighborhoods, particularly choose the older neighborhoods, or even take case studies. Even write up case studies in detail, document seriously what the conditions are. I don't think it's a question of pointing finger to the government, say you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
It's a question of bringing these people's need, to public awareness. And I think given the whole myriad of schemes of welfare provisions and social transfers, it's probably possible to put together specific packages of assistance to specific families.
Yep. So it sounds to me like if the NGO that you're talking about in this that focuses on this particular area is to work and is to provide or create public awareness in this area, which includes the government.
Yeah,
Well, it needs credibility, and it probably needs someone like you to lead it. Well, would you?
Yes, if I were retired from the university, I would seriously consider starting an NGO on the poor.
That's wonderful.
Definitely.
Well, here's to your retirement. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Beng Huat. Well, that was Chua Beng Huat, sociologist, a distinguished professor, and who I'm sure will distinguish himself very soon when he achieves retirement as an academic and embarks on this wonderful, important path of leading an NGO in this very important area. All right. So just don't forget to log in to our website, www.iq.sg, to watch out for our next IQ hit list. Click the links to see other guests who have appeared on our previous episodes as well. Post your comments on social media and let us know if there's someone you would like us to interview on our hit list.